clavier. I have a public service announcement to make before starting this conference. This phone has been left. If it belongs to you, please come to me. This is an FRMCS-enabled phone indeed. This is the first one. And there is someone with a helmet on. So this phone... Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Thomas Châtelet. I'm working at the agency in the ERTMS unit. I'm following FRMCS program very closely. I'm the coordinator for this progress. And this is, this afternoon, the last session before the cocktail. So we have no other possibility to be on time. Otherwise, you are all going to be upset about this session. Nevertheless, we are going to try to entertain you with this FRMCS session. We have the pleasure of having with us distinguished speakers from various companies and organizations. We have Mr. Morten Schlager from Deutsche Bahn Holding. He's representing the railway undertakings in this panel. We have Mr. Dan Mandok from UIC. He's leading the FRMCS program at UIC. We have Pipsa Hallner from Trafikverket. So she's representing one of the two infrastructure managers. And we have Fred Coursan from SNCF Réseau, representing as well infrastructure managers. Léa Pathies from EU Rail, that will let us know more on how EU Rail is contributing to the testing and validation for FRMCS. We have Szilárd Lakatos from Siemens, representing Unitel, especially the onboard part for this panel. We have Mr. Michael Mikulandra from Contron Transportation, representing Unitel as well, more for the trackside part. And we have Mr. Pavliniec Pelske from the Commission, and he's coordinating also the FRMCS aspects. We heard already Pavliniec this morning talking about the TSI. So with this session, what we'd like to know is what are the concrete next steps for FRMCS. We have been discussing already this morning about it, a lot already, I think, for an ERTMS conference. This is somehow giving you a hint on the importance that FRMCS has. We will go for a session of questions and answers directly to the panelists. And they have prepared some supporting slides. So I will directly jump to the questions to all the panelists. And if time allows, we would gladly take some questions directly from the audience and from the Slido at the end of the presentation, obviously keeping in mind the cocktail milestone that we don't want to miss. So without further ado, I will start directly and join the panelists. And the first question would be to you, Pavliniec, on the TSI and what we need to do about FRMCS to be included in the TSI. So What we've seen this morning is the overall timeline for FRMCS, including the logical steps of the V2, the trial, the V3, and ultimately that we would have a TSI allowing for procurement and also to start this notification mechanism for the infrastructure manager for when they would like to decommission GSMR. So in the view of the Commission, what would be the best approach for the next CCS TSI update? You mentioned it already a bit this morning. Do you wait for more items compared to FRMCS to group, or are you prepared for having a TSI only for FRMCS, so a standalone delivery? And an additional question would be on if this is envisaged to have a mandatory date for the installation of FRMCS. I think this was also a pressing question this morning.
Yeah, I'm happy to provide some feedback on that. As you see, it's about running as fast as each of us individually can. So in this case, we talk about if FRMCS can come first, then we let FRMCS come first without adding additional wagons and somehow stopping FRMCS from coming. So the answer is FRMCS can be provided standalone in TSIs if it is needed, meaning that other items that could go together are not delivered as fast or could jeopardize a quick delivery of FRMCS. Knowing that when we bring in FRMCS, we assume we focus on subsets mostly, so there will be almost no major change to the CCS TSI text as such. So as far as CCS TSI is concerned, we hope that FRMCS comes very quickly, thanks to the recommendation that will come from ERA, and that afterwards we will put it into legislation quickly. Now, on the installation deadlines, we have a lot that is happening naturally. It means that there is obsolescence of GSMR, and infrastructure managers will be installing FRMCS because of that, motivated by that. That influences the already existing deadlines that are included in CCS TSI, which indicate that you can switch off GSMR 5 years later, and that is already present in CCS TSI 2023. So that will in fact create a de facto deadline for the deployment of FRMCS on board, but not an overall FRMCS deployment for the time being. This is the situation for today. If we discover, talking to stakeholders, that stronger coordination is needed, and we did already start discussing about coordination, then we shall be open, but today's state is that we do it individually because the incentives coming from the overall situation seem to be sufficient.
Thank you, Javier. We will see, I think, in the questions to the infrastructure manager, their perspective as well on this timeline for migration. And it's understood, thanks to this clarification of yours, that there is not yet any forced timeline to go to FRMCS. And we will see that this is highly depending on the strategies of the infrastructure managers. Continuing in the logical order of this V2, MORAN 2, V3, TSI chain of consequences, we learned this morning from UIC, from Mr. Jean-Michel Evangelou, that the V2 milestone has been met. And I'm very happy to have Dan with us in this panel today, because you have been contributing heavily to this successful delivery of the V2 specifications to EECT, as my colleague Begonia presented this morning. So Dan, my question is rather simple. What were the biggest challenges to meet this milestone of delivery as an input to EECT for V2?
Thank you, Thomas. So before I start speaking, you can see that on this slide you see a picture. The picture is a place in Sweden called Sigtuna, where we had the chance to have an arrangement thanks to PIPSA in particular and Trafikverket. So what you see in this picture is a lot of people, and those people, they are the railway experts working to FRMCS. So the specification, they are not done with ChatGPT. They don't come with a letter from Santa Claus or something. They are written by railway experts and for two of them together with the supply experts. So there are specifications where we try to make possible that we have the same performance in GSMR and better, and then also to think about the operations of the future. And I think it's interesting to see such a list of people, and you can see they are quite happy, not because we told them to say cheese, but they really work, and I see enthusiasm on people working, which hasn't matched in the beginning of GSMR. And also it's important to see that railway people have the competence to write specification, that then you would tune up together with Unitel to make them as a product that can be delivered, and as a product that stays in the train for 10, 12, 15 years, which is not a very small thing. The phone in our pocket, because this was the question, why have you have to do it? Any of your phone will not last in a train for 12 years. Probably will not last in a train for 2 months. Now, the challenge is, because Thomas would chase me on the time, first of all, is that we made a very hard choice that I regret from the point of view of making our life easier. But I think we did the absolute right thing, which is we are working for 5G standalone. I don't know if you know, because it's a bit technical, but most of the network in Europe today, they are 5G non-standalone, which means you have a 4G core, which is a very solid technology, and a 5G radio part, we call it transport. But if you think that in 2030 or so, we're going to have 6G, and then this will move on and on and on, how can we ask railways to implement in 2028 a system which is obsolete in 2 years from then? We expect the system to be in train, to be valid there for 10, 12, or more than that. Then we have two other factors which are the biggest problem, actually. So to come back to the 5G standalone, we are actually standardizing together with 3GPP. We have elements that we are standardizing in 3GPP now to make it happen. So that's not easy. Then you have the future-proof. The early implementers, they should not be penalized because we give them an early product and then we ask them to change it in 2 years. They have to have the product in the train for 10 to 12 years. So every decision we do has to be future-proof. And this takes a lot of time and a lot of discussions. You have no idea how hot can we discuss about a technology, cries and say, that's the right one, that's the right one. But we try to do our best. Then we have the third one, which is the TOBA life cycle. Forget about the radio in the train for 30 years. But forget about the radio in the train for 3 years. So we have to have an equipment in the train which is matching a figure which has 2 figures. And the second should be bigger than 0. So we have to agree with our partners in Unitel to have a TOBA box which is going in the train for 10, 12, or 14 years or so. I don't think anyone of you has in your pocket a telephone for 14 years old and that still works well. Last is the workload, which is terrible. I'm not going to complain here about we didn't take our holidays and stuff to deliver in March. And then the competencies, because you need a mix of railway, 5G, mission critical, IT competence together to do all together. But we have delivered, so we got in the right place.
Indeed. Thank you, Dan, for this very comprehensive answer. We understand the challenges of drafting those specifications, and this is indeed interesting to note how many contributors are actually populating that from the railway companies, mainly, that are representing on this picture. The next question, and following the same logical order of what do we need to reach this V3 set of specifications for the product availability is, and as indicated already this morning, the strong interest from the sector to have an EU trial on FRMCS. So I'm turning now to Leah from EU Rail. From the sector, from ERA as well, there is a strong interest. We see this activity as a very crucial activity because we had in the past comments, notably from the railway sector, notably from CER, that we as ERA, we should not put in TSI or should not recommend to the Commission to have in TSI specifications that are not tested. So the question is quite simple. To which extent is EU Rail contributing to this testing and validation, and what are the concrete plans for this EU trial on FRMCS?
Thank you, Thomas. Good afternoon, everyone. Indeed, there is a sector-wide, wide interest, or there was a sector-wide interest last year when we started discussion on preparing this next step after anticipating the delivery of version 2, which happened a few weeks ago. What's next in anticipation of integration in the TSI, and like you've just mentioned, the importance of testing as much as possible what we have currently in order to make the specification more robust and in anticipation the deployment easier. So EU Rail is stepping in a sense of contributing with a building block to the building, or a piece of the puzzle to the very complex FRMCS picture and puzzle by contributing with financial support and a financial framework for testing and validating this famous V2. So for those of you, and I know there are quite a lot in the room and on the stage right now, who are interested in it, we opened a call a couple of months ago, an open call for proposal to submit a project ID that will be answering all of the key requirements that we've put in this call. I'm not going to enter into the details here and now, but I have a few key facts to present. So we've put on a table overall envelope of 13.5 million euros in EU funding. I like to specify that we did not do it alone. We also getting the support of our sister joint undertaking, SNS JU, working on the CSG development and deployment. So they contributed also to this financial envelope, and I think this is quite important to mention it first and foremost, but also quite important for the cooperation across the different industries, specifically for the telecommunication in rail. What do we expect is a TRL 7, so TRL means technology readiness level, so it means a validation in an operational environment, and we want to have demonstrations on three key type of lines: conventional line, high-speed line, and cross-border line. So really those key facts that I wanted to put and highlight today as key components for this call. When it comes to the details, the call structure is very, let's say, logical in the sense of we're planning to have an entire scope of work developing prototypes that are compliant to this version 2 of the specification. We take those prototypes, we integrate them, we test them in this EU trial or test campaign, whatever definition or denomination you want to use. And of course then we take the results, analyze them, validate them, and we make sure that they are available to the rest of the community, as this is a building block that will feed version 3 of the specifications, and hopefully also feed this first official edition of FRMCS as it is currently expected in the sector. Last part, the call is open until 5th of June. It has been recently extended by 1 month, so also a key information in terms of preparedness for possible applicants. Thank you.
Thanks, Liam. So indeed, we have all eyes turned to this testing and validation, and this is, like I said before, a very crucial step. To conclude this first sequence on the roadmap to availability of the products and the V3, I will now turn to Unitel. I missed this slide, sorry, Léa. I will now turn to Unitel and to Michael in particular. So in the end, the product availability is going to be also crucial if you want to go to this step of first FRMCS commercial operation. So could you detail the roadmap to this availability So maybe onboard, trackside, dispatcher, and also the remaining challenges that you see from the industry side.
Thank you, Thomas, and also from my side, good afternoon. I think this is an interesting question. I guess everyone would agree. The roadmap for the products, the FRMCS products, and I think the simple answer is the industry supplier will make sure that the demand from the market can be satisfied. So when the market needs the products, the industry will do whatever is necessary to provide the products. That's a simple answer, but in the background, obviously, the problem is a different one. So how do we get to the products which are really addressing the customer needs? First of all, I think we have discussed it already, the specifications are the main element in providing then the products which satisfy the requirements. So the specifications, I think now a lot of effort has put into to finalizing the version 2 specifications, which is really good, and the first step into developing then the necessary products. The second step, and I think that's the link to the testing, we have to prove that what we are going to develop in terms of products actually is feasible, does address the customer needs, provides the functionality. So from paper, where the specifications are written on, towards products, there's a certain level of uncertainty, risk. And here, again, I think from an industry supplier perspective, there are lots of investments done on the industry side to make sure that we follow the process, follow the specifications, we do prototype work, and then to be ready for some real testing, which is now coming with the new Eurail project. And ultimately, we want to have that as the right exercise to prove, okay, the products work as expected. There might be things to still be fixed, but overall, we're addressing the needs. So we're certainly not there, because testing still has to be done, but we are quite confident based on the specifications. And again, the specifications, we will likely identify some gaps, some unclarity, which we have to work through, and then come up with a solid product to address the FRMCS functional needs. So it's a journey, and I would say we were somewhere in the middle. But from an industry supplier perspective, it's clear that we have joined that journey with the clear goal to be part of the success, hopefully, of FRMCS. And here, I think it's also important that each of the suppliers has to look at the business case of that potential business in the future. And as such, from a supplier perspective, it's important that we don't delay FRMCS further. There were already some shifts in the timeline in the past, and every year which is added hurts the suppliers, because the investments, the return of invest, if it's later, there's always discussions within the industry. So therefore, I think from an industry perspective, it's clear a priority has to be, we have to come up with FRMCS as early as possible, solid FRMCS, addressing the customer needs, and that might need also a bit of a pragmatic approach to really focus on the priority, which functions are really necessary day one to ensure that we have something day one. Like we can invest and invent new features, think about new functions, but if they're not really needed for day one, they put all the other mandatory features at risk. So as such, focus and no further delays would be the main wish from the industry.
Thank you, Michael. Very clear statement. So with this first sequence, we know that the specs, they are ongoing, that we will have the means to test, and that we will have the industry ready with products corresponding to the specifications, and ultimately the regulatory framework to enable this possibility, because we know also that we will have the discussions between the infrastructure managers and the railway undertaking, how and at which pace should it be implemented. So precisely, let's focus now on the usability of FRMCS from a user perspective, and we will start with the infrastructure manager, and we will start with PIPSA from Trafikverket. So please, PIPSA, can you let us know what's the timeline and strategy for Trafikverket about FRMCS deployment, and what about the operation and maintenance aspects?
Okay, thank you, Thomas. I would like to paint the picture for you first. As an infrastructure manager, we take care of today live operation GSMR, and that has to also be alive when we go to FRMCS during the transition period. So we wanted to paint a picture where we see all participants in different point of view, in use cases, perspective, what are the needs for the users, what do we need to comply with when we implement something new, that we will respect also the legacy what we have, and take care of our operational quality during the period, and also the ecosystem, that everyone in the room is part of the railway ecosystem. So together, as we heard already earlier, it's important that we work together. And the laws and regulations that we also heard earlier, we have some others as well as infrastructure managers to be compliant with, to ensure the safe train operations in our infrastructure. And then the value chain is important for us to take care of the services what we provide today and what services we'll provide tomorrow. And also what kind of socio-economic effects we have. We were already into that today earlier about the cost, the CapEx and OpEx cost, what kind of life cycle management and asset management we have to take care of, and also the competencies. And then last but not least, the technology part. Now you can take the next slides, please. So with all this input, we had to create a plan that we could believe in, and some could maybe say that it is an aggressive plan, but it is a plan. It is put together with all the facts we know today about the status of the specifications, the status of the maturity of the products, and the inputs of the Europe's rail projects coming call. We believe this plan is doable, but there are challenges, and the challenges, you can see it in the middle, that we will have to be very much aligned with the rolling stock. We have to be like partners, more or less, to do the job together. We know the inputs. We also have the fiber infrastructure, the physical infrastructure, IP networks. We have the ETCS rollout in Sweden going the same time. So there is a lot of things to be synchronized the same time. So it's very, very important that this ecosystem will work together so that we can do the deployment as we would like to.
Thank you. So very precise planning. We can notably see there this decommissioning or tentative date for decommissioning of GSMR around 2033. So this is the plan for Sweden. I will now turn to Fred from SNCF. So Fred, how does the SNCF timeline and strategy for FRMCS differ or not from the one exposed by PIPSA? And what about the coexistence between GSMR and FRMCS?
So, in terms of timeline, SNCF is not very different. The timeline for SNCF is not so much different than the one from Trafikverket, and I guess from all the IAM in Europe, because the main time driver is the obsolescence of the GSMR, as it was told several times today and yesterday. So I would like to highlight that in France we have about 29,000 kilometers of lines, among which we have equipped in GSMR 16,500 kilometers, which represent almost the target of the extended network for TEN-T. 97%. And our first target for the FRMCS is to deploy FRMCS where we already have a GSMR. But we realize that when we want to do that, we will differentiate the area where we will have ETCS, because we would like, we will probably have to reach different performance level for the FRMCS where we have ETCS. I would say from internal perspective, we need higher reliability, which implies different architecture with more redundancy and so on. And so for the rest of the network, today we have already a basic service relying on operators, and FRMCS is an opportunity to deploy FRMCS over MNOs for the part of the country where we will not invest in our own infrastructure. And this is important because it would be, if we succeed in developing this FRMCS over MNO, it will be for the driver the same behavior than when he's under our private network. And we have here the opportunity to cover the whole country in FRMCS, partially with MNO, partially with our own infrastructure.
Thank you.
So then regarding the process of migration, we consider mainly voice in this strategy of deployment because the deployment is constrained by the way we are operating the network. So we have in France several regions which are represented here, which are not administrative regions, but which are regions which are area of influence of our operational traffic management centers. And we will do the switching from FRMCS, from GSMR to FRMCS on a complete region, one big night. This is what we have done in the past, the method that we have done in the past between analog and GSMR. And we will do this in a planned manner, region by region. And the reason for that is that one operational center would like to have only one system at a time to contact the train, because we haven't found a simple solution right now to use two systems simultaneously and knowing where the train is located, on which system the train is attached, in fact, from in telecom vocabulary. And so for security reasons, the dispatcher does not should not hesitate and should always be in a position to call the train wherever he is in the region.
Thank you very much.
And then last point is that for the logic of our deployment, we are starting from the border to Paris. And this is resulting from a discussion with the railway undertakings, where we realize that most of the railways, most of the rolling stock is going through Paris region because of the very centralized organization in France, centralized organization which is also reflected in the railway network. And doing Paris as a first step would have obliged to upgrade almost 90% of the fleet.
Okay, thanks. So here what I note, so at least you have a plan, that's very good. And I note as well that this tentative timeline for GSMR decommissioning is 2035, and that you're already in discussion with the RU, so this is offering me the perfect transition to the next question to Morten. So as highlighted by Pavlenich this morning, we have a notification mechanism in the TSI already in place that when an IM wants to switch off GSMR, he needs to notify this 5 years in advance to give some time for the railway undertaking to equip with onboard FRMCS. So what are the challenges for the railway undertaking to be ready in time? Because we know that this 5 year is challenging. And how, additional question, how to coordinate with several infrastructure managers in case a vehicle is authorized for an area of use comprising more than only one infrastructure manager.
Okay. Thanks, Thomas. I think it had been an intense day, and it's just us in front of the cocktail, so allow me to start with an example that might not fully fit to the challenge in front of us. How many of you have already bought a Christmas present? Okay, I see it's 220 days or something in front before we have Christmas. So I ask the same question on the 23rd of December. How many of you have bought a Christmas present? And I'm pretty sure many of you will raise a hand. And then the typical Christmas panic starts. Now imagine it's not the 23rd of December, it's 2027, and the infrastructure manager tells you, in 5 years, I will turn off GSMR. And you have not prepared for the situation. Then most likely you will fail, and many of the trains, part of your trains, might need to stop operation. So what indeed are the challenges in front of us? And I have selected 3 challenges here. First of all, we have already discussed about it, resources. Second, products. And the third, processes. Let me spend a few more words on each of these. Resources. The first and most important resources here is time, right? We have, if I expect that we get the TSI around 2027, and I really trust we will do, then it will still take 2 years to get products developed. And I have hearing you, Michael, that you said the market demand will be fulfilled. Great. But this then means that we have something like 3 to 5 years to do the migration. And we have something like, we estimate around 50 vehicles that we need to do per day. So this means time is a really, really scarce resource here. The second one, and this is related to the time we have, is your workshop capacity, right? So deploying FRMCS is not as simple as some people might think. It's not just pulling out one product, inserting another product. It means you have to find place for new antennas, you have to install new radio cables inside your trains. This might take between 1 to 2 weeks, depending on your vehicle. So then if you have this amount of vehicles that you have to retrofit in a very short time frame, I just can say good luck if you don't start today. The next one is resources. We have talked about the lack of people with 2G experience, but we do need a huge amount of people with a good engineering capabilities, with an idea of 5G in order to get this done. And also resources with respect to certification, authorization, right? If we do, and it had been pointed out by many of you today, if we do certification and authorization as we are doing it today, we have a high risk again to fail. So resources is one of the big challenges that I see. The second one is products. It's of course, first of all, about FRMCS products. We do need to have FRMCS products, and it's not just that we want to have FRMCS products for new trains. We need to retrofit our existing fleet, and the products need to make this migration as simple as possible, with respect to how it can be done, but also with respect to certification. But then, if we finally have FRMCS up and running, it is like a smartphone without any application on it. So if we do not ensure that the application will work on top of FRMCS, it will fail. And here we already discussed it a few times. I think most important here is how can we ensure that ETCS will operate on top of FRMCS without, I mean, of course, solutions available, but without the need to do a huge replacement and huge retrofit project, especially for all the thousands of vehicles that will have by 2030 an ETCS version based on baseline 3. These are the second big challenge that I see. And now I come to the last one, processes. And of course, there are more challenges, but I thought I stick with 3 here. Processes, right? First of all, yes, the TSI give us 5 years, very good. Some time to get prepared, to get it done. But in the end, I think it's more is needed than just having the information I'm going to phase out GSMR. It's very important to understand what are the best lines to start the migration with. Start, for example, with islands, so with lines where you have a very, very easy way of operation, and then try to increase the complexity. Try to find lines that have not too many vehicles on it, so that there's a close cooperation between railway undertakings and the infrastructure manager. And last one on this, the processes, I already touched on it. we have to ensure that the certification and authorization becomes much, much more simple than it is today. And I think these are the three big challenges I see here. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. I will continue the questions, and with respect to the time, ask the speakers to maybe try to be even more concise. I understand this is a difficult exercise. The next question is for you, Michael, on the FRMCS deployment that, as we heard from Pipsa and Fred, might differ from one user to another one. How does Unitel intend to support the railway stakeholders with those scenarios?
So I think let's focus on this migration. I think Martin already mentioned it. Migration, we have onboard, we have trackside. And now try to compare it with projects we have done over the last 10 years or so, and try to look at the complexity we did face at that time. Now we entering into a new system with new principles, new architecture, new base functions, you can say. So this complexity is not comparable to anything we have seen before. And that's, I think, important to realize. So if we wait until we know everything, including specifications, including maybe some environmental information, where exactly a site will be located, what radio scenario does exist at a certain location, if we wait for all the information we usually would like to have, we entering into a very dangerous mode. And I think it's really time, and I think actually even the prior conferences we raised the point, this is really a wake-up call. We need to start as early as possible to get control, even control is the wrong word, but try to cut this big elephant into smaller pieces, into smaller slices. Because we can start with some areas to bring down the complexity of an FRMCS introduction. I'll give you an example, transmission network. We know for FRMCS we will require a new transmission network. And that's something you can start much earlier than rolling out your radio equipment along the tracks or doing some installations in your core networks. And there are many examples here what you can do. And we need to start with these exercises. Even the planning, preparation of those helps. If we wait, until we know, maybe or have a better picture, it will be too late. We need to start as early as possible and try to tackle maybe the small problems early, then get into the bigger problems. There will be enough problems on our way to FRMCS, but we have to start as early as possible. Every minute, every hour we can save up front, we will be happy at one point in time that we have saved them. If we don't, the time will not allow a successful FRMCS introduction, because there will be a complexity we are facing, there will be issues on that path, issues we have not even thought about today. There will be issues and complications, and as such, let's try to bring the complexity down as early as possible. From an industry perspective, we will contribute as much as possible. Like we have done that exercise with some of our customers already, and we're willing to discuss that in whatever form, just to help to move on, to really have some progress. I think that's really important, because if we don't, unfortunately, we have to say we will fail. We have to start as soon as possible.
Okay, understood. So along those migration scenarios, there is one that is largely bespoken and that Fred already alluded to, is the support of the so-called MNO scenario, so how to take benefit of third-party service provider. So in this case, MNO, this is the simplest acronym to refer to this scenario. I have a question to Pipsa there, because we know that some IMs, they are thinking about this for some lines, for some applications. So is it the case for Traffic Verket? And if yes, have you already engaged in discussion with such service providers to anticipate the challenges this model represents?
Okay, thank you, Thomas. Yes, the easy answer is that we would use MNOs as a backup, like a hybrid solution, dedicated network for the mission critical, and a backup with the MNOs. But since we are living in the complex world and we have opportunities when we implement something new, so we think that different lines might have different needs, so we might not have to implement every line the same way as we have done with the GSMR today. So we think that there might be an opportunity using MNOs in some parts, and we are doing a pre-study now. We started last year and then we continue this year, where we do proof of concepts, and we do have discussions with our mobile operators in Sweden, whether they are interested to join and test, because we really encourage that we test it. And the important thing is also for the MNOs, whether if you should use them in Sweden, to see if they can comply to the laws and regulations that are put on. It's quite a big responsibility to provide services via MNOs. So we want to have a fair play with all the stakeholders, that if we see during the pre-study phase that, okay, it's doable, we can do MNO in some lines, then we might do so. But we will do big research and study on the options and possibilities we have. And so far we have interest in the Swedish MNOs to participate.
Okay, very interesting. Thanks for this answer, Pipsa.
Thank you.
So, one of the other aspects that was largely bespoken on this MNO is to which extent the FRMCS specifications are going to allow that. So here this is a direct question to you, Dan. So how is it reflected in the FRMCS specifications? And maybe some words on the technical challenges this represents to include that in the FRMCS specifications.
Yep, thank you. So before I speak about this, I want to take just 1 minute about migration. So first of all, I think the message from Morten yesterday, especially when he was a bit more live, and today is very clear. I think the migration is, and I also, of course, agree with you, Michael. I see migration problem is big, first of all, for the onboard. Of course, it's everywhere. And for the onboard is about possibilities. Do you change the box? Do you do something different and other things? I think that with Morane 2, we will have lots of details. And I think that we have to start indeed the migration discussion earlier. We're planning a bit later. Thanks to the discussion we had yesterday, I think that we start them a little earlier. We're planning this, but we were putting focus on it, but I will put more focus on it. So I think it's important so that we do something where we win some time, because the problem migration is time and complexity. Now to come back on your question, which I don't remember. So now to come back to your question, so there's a big discussion on these MNOs, and the discussion has become trivial in the sense of you don't know anymore what to speak about because of the way it was used. So I want to make a few things very clear on behalf of UIC, or at least on behalf of my name, if I'm allowed to say on behalf of UIC. FRMCS is a 5G standalone mission-critical system. So it's a 5G system. If it's a 5G system, it works to any 5G frequency. There is no technical problem. Now the problem is, as I said, that the phone in your pocket will not be the radio, the TOBA box in the train, or the onboard FRMCS. So we need to understand a number of things. We have to clarify the fact that the MNO radio modules have a much lower power than the FRMCS radio modules, which means a different radio link, which means smaller cells. We have to understand the maintenance of it. We have to understand the fact that we have a set of quality of service parameters, but it's not a problem. We just have to understand the constraints. We, as per the instruction we had that I took from Eric, we have treated the problem of coexistence. Coexistence with RMR, and it's important to say with RMR because when I say RMR, it's FRMCS and GSMR. We have analyzed the 7 5G frequency bands in Europe. We introduced them in the specification. We qualified 2 of them for coexistence possible operations, and we need to do some more work with the others. Those are possible, but with some very high isolation methods and interference risk and stuff like that. So it's one thing to do fallback or to do train performance. Another thing is to do full MNO on the main line. Nobody says it's not possible. So this is not a technical problem. It's an implementation problem, and we have to look in the face of the figure and the face of the problem, test it, and see what we can do. So
All right.
just have to work on it.
Thanks a lot.
A bit more that we do in Morane too, actually.
Thanks a lot for
additional
this
work.
clarification. I think it was needed to give this message of reassurance on the feasibility of the MNO scenario because we heard also from the infrastructure managers that this is needed. I will now change to another sequence and go and react to the workshops that we had yesterday and where the idea of a coordinated approach for FRMCS deployment was tested by some of the workshop participants. So this is the direct question to you, Vaviniec. I think this was also discussed during a recent Railway Interoperability and Safety Committee. What are the plans, if any, about a coordinated approach for FRMCS deployment? Can you develop this idea for the audience, please?
Yes, I will try to bring some ideas about coordinated approach. And there was definitely a call from stakeholders in order to coordinate the approach of FRMCS deployment. The idea was to base the mechanism on something that was developed for digital automatic coupler, like the so-called EDDP, so European DAC deployment program. The EU Rail has already a group that is designed for that purpose. It's called the deployment groups. And it helps analyzing the deployment scenarios, making cost-benefit analysis, discuss different ways to deploy. It is short of funding, so obviously here we need to think about other mechanisms for funding coordination. Obviously, if in the future there is stronger mechanism developed around the deployment of ERTMS, we may benefit from that. Definitely the 10T regulation is now bringing the ERTMS coordination forum, which may help further the deployment discussions. Obviously, what will need to be discussed is issues around what kind of timing, what is the time sequencing, what are the frequencies used by different infrastructure managers, and what is the synchronization of the deployment between not only other technologies, but also cross-border between different infrastructure managers. This all calls for additional coordination, and let's try to deliver it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next question would be exactly on the same topic, and this would be to Morten, actually, because we heard that there is an initiative in Germany about coordination between all the interested FRMCS stakeholders, so the Fahrzeugmigration Initiative. Can you please share some information with us on this initiative and what is the benefit for railway undertakings, most importantly?
Yeah, sure, thanks. So can you imagine a rowboat like displayed on the screen where everybody is doing what he wants to do, not joining forces in order to get this forward? And I think this is exactly the situation we are facing. One thing is missing still in this rowboat. Let's assume there are 8 persons, then you typically have one additional who is doing the steering, the coordination, right? And this is exactly the core idea here. Sometime back, 2 or 3 years back, we had an issue. There's, beside ensuring a safe and interoperable railway service, we also dear very much for a very good internet connectivity for our passengers. And there's a frequency close to the GSMR frequency that could not be used for LTE because it is a bit in conflict with the GSMR network. So we had a big campaign in trying to hardening all the cap radios against it. And it was a really good program. It was substituted, so everything was fine. And we had been very, very successful, but we just managed to get 90 to 95% of the railway undertakings operating in Germany to do this hardening in time. And just because we did not manage to achieve 100%, we had to delay the turn on of these additional frequencies for our passengers. And this was a bit of the starting point that we decided we have to do something different when it comes to the big challenge of FRMCS migration. So we tried to get all the people who are, all the stakeholders who are involved into the same boat, again a boat, and try to work out what are the challenges and how could be the way forward to make it happen. And here I think one important point or one important result is, and we already touched on this, is coordination, of course. But another very important point here, what is exactly the responsibility of the coordination, right? It is not, and I think this is very important, it is not the medicine for each and everything. The migration itself stays under the responsibility of the vehicle owners of the railway undertakings. But the coordination and the sector with all the stakeholders have to ensure that the right framework is set, that the right program is available, that the right conditions are there. And then it can be and should be supportive. So a central coordination with a very, very clear role supporting the migration phase. But then, of course, there are further things that help when you join your forces. And again, I listed 3 points here, and you might have missed them when I had been talking about challenges. One is financing, the other one I already touched on, authorization, and the third one, material and chipset. I think especially the first one, financing, is a very, very important thing. Without the right financing model, we will have a very, very big issue to get this done. Authorization, I think, because of the time I skipped, I already mentioned it. And also for chipsets, I think there had been already quite some improvement, but still here, it's very important that we join forces, because most critical for us to get the right products is also that the right chipsets are available. And with this, due to the time, I will stop here. So
thank you very much, Martin.
Martin.
So this is giving me the transition to the question to Szilard, actually, because I think that is in Fahrzeug Migration Initiative. The industry is involved. So Szilard, from your perspective, how can the supply industry support the migration from GSMR to FRMCS, especially for the onboard, especially for the RUs?
So there are a couple of things that I would like to highlight, which I believe are very important to make a seamless FRMCS transition and also cost-effective FRMCS transition, at least from an onboard perspective. And these are modularity, flexibility, early cooperation, and coordination. So for us as industry, it's very important to support the railways to protect their investment that they've done in the last few decades. So we are designing and developing our products in a modular way to enable a seamless FRMCS upgrade. Obviously, this level of upgrade depends very much on the railway's FRMCS adoption strategy. But there are multiple solutions from various manufacturers how to address this challenge, how to minimize the additional equipment, and how to make this transition to FRMCS as seamless as possible. Now, when it comes to flexibility, and when it comes to replacing an existing system or changing an old legacy system, we would like to show our flexibility. What that means is, again, going back to my initial point of protecting the investment, you will find a lot of equipment which can be reused on the trains. For example, cables, connectors, auxiliary equipment. We also would like to make sure that if that's the case and displays needs to be changed, how to make sure that we're minimizing the engineering effort that comes with redesigning a driver's desk. Those are huge costs. So we want to show our flexibility and to work together with the railways to make that happen. Now, as my last point, when it comes to, which then you already mentioned, early cooperation, early collaboration with the railways. I think it's very important and something that UNITA really wants from the railways, to have this early engagement, to understand the implementation plans for the railways. Never is too early. The earlier we know, the better we can be prepared for the future. And when it comes to the actual introduction of FRMCS, and I'm talking about the rollout, So whenever the version 3 specification will be introduced in the TSI, I'm sure there will be more than one early adopters. And that could create a real challenge because we need to make sure that there is a real cooperation and collaboration across the entire stakeholders to make it possible to run projects parallel, and that is a very important point. And again, that goes back to what's been discussed throughout these 2 days, the resource issue.
Thank you. In respect to the time, because we are already at the end of this session, and I've not evacuated all my questions. Unfortunately, I will only select 3 more questions that I would like you to be very precise. And this one is for you, Szilard, again, on the chipset situation, because this was alluded to by Morten, and we know this is also a contentious topic. So maybe very briefly on the chipset, where do we stand?
We'll have the hot topic at the end. Okay, so as a matter of fact, as of today, there's no chipset available which supports the FRMCS RMR band, the N100 and the 101 band, so the 900 megahertz FTD and the 1900 megahertz TDD, with obviously the elevated power level which is needed, which is the 31 dBm. Now, what we believe is that first, probably the N101 band will be used, and then later on there will be a demand for the N100 band. Why is this so difficult? And I think we need to try to look things from, to solve the issue as soon as possible, which we need to. We need to try to look things from a chipset manufacturer's point of view. What is a viable business case for them? We run the number at the Unitel, and we calculated roughly how much chipsets the industry will need in the upcoming years. And we couldn't go above 1 million. And we said, okay, roughly about 1 million, is that a viable business case for a chipset manufacturer? Well, that's not really attractive to them. So this is the challenge. This is the challenge that we need to overcome. And there's been multiple initiatives within the industry to approach different chipset manufacturers to address this challenge and to solve this problem. So we're very confident that this could be solved. However, there will be a need for support, for financial support to address this challenge. And the other thing that I believe is very challenging is that there was no clear owner to solve this issue. Who's taking responsibility for it?
Okay.
And I think that was a real challenge.
Thank you, Szilard. Very clear. So the penultimate question would be to Léa about the European Deployment Group, because in EU Rail, I think that you have also something on the deployment group. So very, very shortly, Léa, sorry about that, because I have one last question to Fred, then to conclude. So how is this helping us for the FRMCS case?
I was scared. I thought you were going to ask me about the chipset and whether I was responsible for that. Yeah, no, it's just to echo what Vavkara said about the deployment group. He mentioned it in his intervention. Just to give a bit of background. Everyone knows about the system pillar. Everyone knows about the innovation pillar in the Europe's Rail program. What is less known for the moment is the deployment group. It's still also deeply embedded into our regulations, so it's foreseen from the very beginning, for the main reason that we're working on the architecture, we're working on the uptake of the technical work into the TSI standard and so on, but we also need to make sure that whatever is developed inside the program can also reach the market in an efficient manner and coordinated as much as possible. So development group is about to be launched, and it's been, I think, lots of discussions that one of the first topics that should be addressed by the deployment group should be the deployment and the migration of FRMCS. It offers a platform inside Europe's Rail for discussion with all the stakeholders that are expected to be involved in this discussion, and make sure that we are going forward in this discussion, and echoing all of the fellow panelists have said, in a coordinated manner as much as possible and harmonize, standardize in some ways, because we haven't touched upon the migration to the install base, but it's also quite a hot topic. And this group could be a platform that can enable this, like we've done at JU level with the DDP, for instance.
Thank you very much, Leah. So this is now the final question to Fred. I'm sorry I had to cut some questions to respect the time, but this one I would like to have precisely, because this is about the national implementation plans that, according to TSI, are a must for the member states to notify the Commission, if I'm not wrong, Pavlinic. And so, Fred, you have been working on the NIP for France. Can you let us know exactly how it works, to have a very concrete example from France, and then as an example for all the other member states to be reminded of their obligation for this NIP? Fred, please.
So in France, the state administration in charge of transport asked us more than 1 year ago, almost 1 year and a half, to prepare input for this NIP, for this national implementation plan. So we worked, so they asked SNCF Réseau to prepare inputs and to do some consultation of the stakeholders in France, which are, of course, the railway undertakings, but also the regional authority of transport, who have a responsibility in the rolling stock in France. So this was done. We have done a study. We have done several scenarios and proposal, and we have presented them to the railway undertakings in session where they were all available to provide their inputs. So this is a process which was followed in France, and then it's up to the ministry, of course, to provide these inputs. I would like to say that in this exercise we have provided a very precise figure to the member state, and we have realized also that we will have to deploy due to the time constraint in a very short time, which will require resources and financing, and this financing on this short period is not sustainable for the infrastructure manager. So we definitely need some subsidiaries to develop to be able to deploy in time according this short period where the effort is concentrated. And last point, I will not go through all the challenge, but we said, okay, it's a very challenging process to deliver it in a short time. For this, you will need a team. You will need to mobilize a team. We don't have this team waiting in an office that the project start. But to mobilize this team, we will need to have the assurance that we have this financing. In such a way, we can recruit and train and go to the level of knowledge that is needed to deploy the network.
Indeed. Thank you for those insights on what this is, how this is happening at the French level. We have reached 18:30, so I speak under the control of my colleagues, but are we entitled to take some questions from the floor? Yes, 2 questions, so we are entitled, this is not us, entitled by the organizers to take 2 questions. So please, who would like to have a question? And if you can already address this question in particular to some of the speakers, that would be very much appreciated. Are there any questions or comments from the audience, or are you really in a rush for the cocktail? That can be an option as well. Indeed, we must have been so clear that there are no questions. So, Mr. Köstinger, please.
I would like to refer to the last slide presented by the colleague from SNCF Réseau. Could we go back?
Sure.
The second bullet from below.
No, I cannot go back. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
But the colleague was referring to rolling stock shall be done in time. Shall be done. What if that does not happen? Because I tell you what I fear personally. I have not introduced myself. I'm Wolfgang Köstinger from ÖBB. I fear that we will repeat the mistake we did with our ETCS rollout. Infrastructure and rolling stock is not going hand in hand. And following what I've heard now from the very interesting presentations you gave, I fear we will do the same. I see, for instance, PIPSA presenting a chart starting with the vehicle retrofit in 27 or 28, 1 year after specification. Based on what we heard from Michael Mikulandra, this won't happen. So, especially a question to the infrastructure manager, representing the audience here. What if that doesn't happen?
Thank you.
So first of all, if I may, there's a mechanism in the TSI of 5-year notification for the infrastructure manager that need to notify in advance, 5 years in advance, the railway undertaking that GSMR will be decommissioned into one line. And if they want to continue circulating onto that line, they will have to be equipped with FRMCS in time. So that's the starting point for discussion with railway undertakings, which is to say we don't want to arrive at this extremity that we will stop some traffic because they are not equipped, but at one point of time, if the GSMR is failing because it's really end of life, we will have no choice.
Pipsa, you want to complement? Maybe the situation is slightly different in Sweden?
Yes, I can complement. I agree. I said the plan is aggressive, but it's on purpose because we want to establish the dialogue with all the partners so we can plan together. And I know that there is different investment periods also. So in Sweden, we really try to engage everyone to discuss. And of course, if there is need, so we will revise the plan. But that is the current plan we have, and we want to collaborate and cooperate to get there together. So we have the first thing we did actually when we started this FRMCS pre-study, we looked all the lessons learned from the ETCS project done in Sweden, just to take those learnings into account. So that's my message to all, that we really want to collaborate and do the plan together.
Indeed, and we can also rely on the words from the Commission and EURail on their deployment group to try to foster also those collaboration, and also take example from the German sector initiative to have this dialogue already included. But thanks for the reminder, Mr. Kostinger. Indeed, without the collaborative effort, it's going to be extremely challenging. So on those words, I would like to close the session, and I would like to invite you to congratulate the speakers for this quite interesting discussion. Thank you very much. Merci. Thanks a lot. And the cocktail is awaiting you. Just a second. I did invite you to the cocktail on behalf of Joseph, but please, Joseph.
Sorry for standing between you and the cocktail. So Christian and I will just say a few concluding remarks. Christian, you go first, and then.
Well, let's make this quick, right? Just to, Joseph, a few highlights of the day. First of all, record attendance. And tomorrow the level for the Commission will go up. My boss, the Director General of DG Move, Magda Kopczynska, will come. So we're not done, but really to see so many people coming to Valenciennes and online, I think that's. I remember 2 years ago was already great, but this is greater. But second point, I also think the message is changing. We're not discussing whether to have ERTMS. We are discussing how to do so, and we are meeting today on the day of the adoption of the 10T regulation that makes ERTMS a legal obligation. Again, here I was struck by an anecdote from Matthias Rüde when 15 years ago he was talking to a German official, and they say, we will never implement ERTMS. If you come to Germany with a train, bring a box and run your train, but forget about this being rolled out. Things have changed. And that is great. Third highlight, I have to highlight the Spanish case. I hope it sticks in your mind as well, to see how ERTMS isn't just a technical thing. It allows more services being offered, prices to fall, the modal shift to happen. So I've come up, Joseph, with another abbreviation for ERTMS, and it is ERTMS rollouts triggers stronger modal shift in Spain. That also works. And lastly, I also echo the calls we heard on funding, right? You all want to give the European Commission 100 million euros so that we can give it back to you. Please talk to the member states about this. More seriously, I think the tool of the national implementation plans that have been discussed, including in the panel just now, that is a serious instrument that we should really use and not have them developed in isolation, but have them developed with member states looking across the board and see, what are you doing? Okay, we're doing it this way. And then, of course, the reinforced mandate of the ERTMS coordinator, making sure that things work out. So with that, Joseph, I think a lot of interesting points during this day. And I take a lot of sort of optimism from this, and we'll continue tomorrow.
Well, many thanks, Christian. And from my side, I fully support, of course, the conclusions on the highlights by Christian. So just let me state, we have always had the slogan, ERA is the place where people meet. Today, we have to extend it. The ERTMS 2024 conference is where the ERTMS people meet. We had excellent and at times a bit critical in the contents presentations. We had good exchanges over the marketplace. I saw loads of interesting discussions during the coffee break, so networking seems to be a key feature of this conference. We heard lessons learned on many aspects. Of course, FRMCS, as the last panel showed, is the hot topic. And we have, as Pipsa said, we have tight schedules, and those tight schedules will be challenging. Let me thank all the speakers, all the moderators, all the people behind the scene who have managed the technology and who have managed the organization on site. And now, let's go to the cocktail. So.